look good? Am I looking good? Okay, that's good.
So, how did you get your start into comics?
The famous question, right?
Yeah.
It's like, how do you get... I've been drawing comics since... No, I shouldn't say that. I've been drawing since I was 4, right? And then when I got into grade school, I met Chris Winter, who's right next to me, and we drew together, in grade school, and we were into DC comics. And then I discovered I had to move, and so I went to a different grade school, finished, and I discovered Marvel right at the beginning, like 62. I was like, 7 or something, or 8. And so I went nuts and started collecting Marvel comics. And then I had friends between Chris and another one, and we started drawing our own comics, right? We're kids. And my dad was a principal, so he had access to printing equipment. So we'd go in the weekend and print our comic books and then sell them. And then we got into fanzines, and I was an editor of The Sentinel, which is actually kind of a cool fanzine that got reviewed recently. And we did interviews at Comic Cons like San Diego, and I never thought I'd be a comic book artist. I wanted to be, but I'm not going to move to New York. I live in Portland, Oregon. And so in the end, Chris moved to New York. And after he'd showed his portfolio, and this is after we'd worked I was an animator, did TV commercials, and he had worked with me at a book company doing illustration and editing. He got work, and I was able to submit my work to him, and I got in at Marvel with Carl Potts and started with Alien Legion, led to Spider-Man, and we helped start Dark Horse, and the rest is history. I mean, it was quite the odyssey.
Nice. So when you started drawing it, you said 4 years old. What did you draw most?
It was mostly DC stuff, because my grandma had bought me comic books. Is this just for you to frame?
It's to Gabe.
Oh, to Gabe?
Gabe.
Okay. Gabe. Okay.
And this is Gabe right here.
Oh, hi, Gabe. Good. Thanks for coming by.
Thank you.
My grandma and my mom bought me comics. They were the big supporters. My dad was a principal. He wasn't so sure about the comic book thing, but he was real proud of me once I made it in comics, obviously. But, I was reading at age 4 because of them. So I was, comics taught me to read. So, I think my first stuff was like Space Ranger. I was like drawing weird stuff, and they were half stick figures. I mean, we're not talking anything cool.
Yeah.
So, but it was just, I was into it. I wanted to do it.
Yeah, and online it's mentioned that you're an inker, but did you start out as an inker, or?
I was an animator for 10 years. So I learned about drawing and actually studied with a Disney animator, Stan Green, who was like one of the top guys. He became a director and stuff later. And so we had a partnership of 3 guys who I'm going to go visit one after this show. We're going up to Squim, see Jim Bradrick and his wife Johnny, and that'll be exciting because we were partners for about 10 years, and I did animation, and then because I moved did educational book stuff, and then Chris was able to help get me into Marvel, and it ended up being, that was the right thing in the end. Animation's a lot of work, but it taught me how to draw.
Yeah.
And so, and I've done penciling for Dark Horse, not so much for Marvel. I mean, they let me do pinups and stuff like that, but I never really did long stories for them. It was mostly inking. I did over 4,000 pages of inking, so it was enough. I always figure I did enough.
And then with the indie market kind of booming a little bit, have you thought about joining in on that, or are you still working in the industry?
No, I retired kind of pretty much. I mean, I did some independent stuff for several companies, but by 2012 I was done with Marvel. Really, it was more like 2009, but that was the last year I went to San Diego Con. I'm done with San Diego, it's too big. But, it's like I've done a few projects, and I had some projects of my own when I was in Studiosaurus with people like Aaron Lopresti and Gary Martin, and Terry Dodson. But just, the market changed, and doing self-publishing really wasn't worth it, and it's a lot of work. And I don't have the passion for my characters that other people do, like Ron Randall and Trekker. He's been real successful. And to me, it is a lot of work. I mean, it doesn't stop with the drawing or the writing.
Yeah.
You got to follow that all the way through the printing process, and I know those processes, because I used to work in printing and stuff too. So I'm retired, and I play jazz guitar, I ride bikes, I do kayaking, I do camping and hiking, and my wife, we want to do as many of those as before we get old and broken down.
Yeah,
So
understandable.
So I did my 25 years at Marvel, whatever.
What book did you work on at Studiosaurus?
It was called Chicks. That was the book that came out. We did 2 issues, and that was what kind of taught me. Each of us did our own character. The first one sold great, and we all got good checks, and I think Image Comics published it for us. And then the next one, number 2, sales dropped way off, even though we got some guest artists that were more famous than we were, and people were just buying number 1s. It was like, and I thought, it's over, man. I'm not going to try and do a series and have it flop, So
throughout the years, did you get to work with your buddy Chris Warner a lot, or?
Yeah, in the beginning, we worked at Marvel, and we worked on Alien Legion for a year or 2, and then I stayed on it, and he moved over, and then we did Doctor Strange for a year or 2, and then he did Moon Knight, and I kept doing Alien Legion and Doctor Strange, and then I picked up G.I. Joe as a monthly because I was waiting to try and get on a bigger book, and I had some good editors, and ultimately it was Eric Larson, who was from Bellingham, Washington, and we met, and when he was a kid, and he used to come down to the shows in Portland, he goes, when he got the Spider-Man book, I guess because he knew Todd McFarlane or something, I don't know, but he was good, and he goes, Randy, I want you to ink it, and I go, I'm on Amazing Spider-Man, yes! So that was the big break. And then once I got on Amazing Spider-Man, I was on it for 6 years, and then another year and a half or a year on Web of Spider-Man before they canceled. And then Marvel went Chapter 11 bankrupt, and it was like, it was like fend for yourselves, whatever.
Do you get any royalties from the movies? Or?
Oh, not from the movies, but they send me regular reprint royalties.
Okay.
I get those at least once a month, and it's been really good. I'm happy. Disney continues to pay, so that's all good.
All right.
Dr. Carl.
That's everything for today.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I'm with Chris Warner.
Hi.
So I started with what got you into comics, and
Okay, well, I'm sure I got into comics the same way most people do. I started reading comics when I was a kid, and eventually I'd been doing artwork for a variety of different jobs, and got tired of that, and so I thought maybe I could give comics a shot, and I did, and luckily I hooked an editor at Marvel and kind of went from there, and then after working at Marvel for a few years, my friends Mike Richardson and Randy Stradley started Dark Horse Comics, and I'd been living in the New York area when I was working for Marvel in the mid '80s, and so I moved back to Portland and helped Dark Horse get off the ground and worked on a bunch of projects for them. Predator is the most well known of those. So I basically then worked and after I'm pretty slow as an artist, so I eventually moved into editorial, and I just retired about January 2024. I retired from staff at Dark Horse, so I still work on stuff, but I'm an old guy and I'm enjoying retirement.
You worked on Predator. Was that your choice of IP that you wanted to work on, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's like when Dark Horse. What really kind of got Dark Horse sort of major attention were the licensed properties that we worked on. First one being Aliens, and that ended up being a big hit. And then Predator was also from Fox, and it was another movie that But at the time. When the major companies were doing, movie-related projects, they weren't major priorities for them because they have their own characters that are their priority, and so they would do movie adaptations and stuff. And they often were, with some exceptions, notable exceptions, were with less popular writers and artists because they were just trying to make a buck while a movie was out. But we thought that there were, and this was well before the internet was really not a big thing. Even home video was not ubiquitous at that point. And so we thought, hey, there's other stories here. And we thought, well, we'll put good people on the books and really, try to, honor those properties with doing really good stories and stuff. And that worked. And then of course, then everyone started doing, doing spin-off comic series of film properties and TV properties and stuff, and but also Predator was kind of like, that was one of my favorite action movies ever, and it was kind of right in my wheelhouse of the kind of stuff that I like to do. And so I said, like, yeah, I wanted to do that, absolutely.
And then after that, did you come up with Barbwire yourself, or was that?
Yeah, that was a character that I'd already, like, the very first Dark Horse comic, which was Dark Horse Presents, has my character Black Cross in it. So I'd already done that, and Mike Richardson had seen this character idea that I had for Barbwire, which actually was very different than how it's turned out now. But when Mike wanted to start a superhero universe at Dark Horse, which was called Comics Greatest World, he said, like, I really want to do Barbwire. But he wanted to buy it. He wanted to buy the character. So I said, like, I was not really planning to ever work on it. So I said, like, sure, we can do that, because allowing me some, kind of proprietary input and on any kind of future projects. And so I did that, and I think it turned out pretty well. I'm pretty happy with it. The movie had some issues, I think, that were more related to kind of, like when Pamela got involved with Tommy Lee, that was kind of like, so there were concerns the movie was going to get an R rating, regardless of the content. Which I think was a mistake. By the Dark Horse had like no control in the movie and stuff. So I think the first half an hour of the movie is not good, but I think once it gets up and rolling, it's pretty good. And I think I got a chance to work with Pamela for a little while before she signed on to the project on some like preliminary costume design stuff. And she was awesome. She was like just sweet and friendly and funny and smart and no star baggage stuff. She was awesome. So. I would hope that she looks back on it with some degree of fondness, because I think that I was really happy to be to have that project get into film. That was really great.
So how far did you have to travel to come to this con?
I'm from Portland, so it's not too bad. It's not too bad. It's, 2.5 hours, 3 hours, something like that.
Yeah, and then how much did you get involved with Barbwire? You said you were.
Well, with the movie, not really at all.
Oh,
but I mean, just like before, to kind of get Pamela kind of excited, because like I think what had happened is like the comics.
Let's talk about the comic.
Yeah, well, I'm saying that the comics, like I had done. I wrote a sequence in the first project for Comics Greatest World, which was kind of like a 16 issues, one issue a week for 16 weeks, that introduced these different characters, but with one overarching story in it. And so I wrote a section of that, and it became a monthly book, and there was a different writer, John Arcudi, who's a friend of mine, different editor, and but then later I did a series called Ace of Spades that I wrote and drew, and then a few years ago I wrote 2 different Barbwire series, but as kind of a relaunch, that was drawn by Pat Olive, who's a phenomenal artist, and I think that turned out really well. So, and I'd like to do some more, if the opportunity happens. But again, it's a Dark Horse property now, so that's kind of up to them.
Yeah. Did you have a favorite project you worked on throughout this time?
That's a hard call. I don't know. Because it's sort of like. My favorite project is like whatever I'm working on at the time.
Okay.
Just that's what I get focused on. The way that I do my process with writing and research and stuff. That to me is the fun part of it. Is the sort of building out of, starting with nothing and what you end up with is. It's all hard work and sometimes it's like when I look at work that I did when I was much younger, I can see a lot of flaws in it that my later work corrected. So at the time, it's hard for me to remember like how much I liked the project or not. All I can remember is like what I did wrong. So that way with the any new project that I work on, hopefully I've learned enough to not make those same mistakes. So
that'll do. Thank you for the interview.
Sure.
It's nice meeting you.
Let me give you a card when you get this thing up.
Okay.
So we're rolling. This
Okay.
is our third interview, actually, because I interviewed him once and you interviewed me, and now it's you again. So, what kind of advice would you give someone putting together a booth for a con?
Organization is key. I keep getting chastised by my wife and my daughter now about my disorganized. Trying to figure out spatial relations, not bringing too much stuff, but bringing the right stuff that people might buy is a really difficult thing to figure out. And one of the things I do think in terms of presentation is get yourself a table runner. It makes it look a little nicer. These wooden type display, they break down and sort of flatten, so you can just kind of like tie them together to transport them. But they look really nice. They're easy to put together and take apart to display, like books and things like that. So I think that's key to get stuff up off the table so people can actually see you from a distance and see what you're selling. Of course, banners that I have back here with my name on it, and my website in some cases, featuring my characters or whatever you're going to be promoting or selling. Let me straighten that up. So those are sort of the main things to think about, is just, you know, presentation. And of course my table and booth always looks great, and then the show starts, everything is destroyed. So much for looking good and professional, but at least I started off with the right intent.
And how's the crowd been? Has it been a lot of people from online, or do you see a lot of new faces? Or?
Every once in a while you run into a few people you've never met before, and they're new to your book or whatever, and so that's always great to be able to actually hopefully make a new reader or customer. Mostly I do see repeat people, either people that watch my YouTube shows and interact in the YouTube shows, or people that have bought art from me before or are longtime readers of my stuff. So I see a lot of familiar faces when I do shows, especially in this area, local Northwest area where I'm from. So I've been, doing shows like this in this area for 30 years. So you see a lot of the same people coming back, which is nice, that you've got, regular customers that come in and that have stayed with you for your entire career. But you always do get a couple people that are completely unfamiliar with you, and it gives you an opportunity to kind of get them on board with the new books or whatever you've got that they're just not familiar with.
And then you have Wraith of God 3 Pure Hollow on Indiegogo right now.
That is correct.
What is the timeline for the closeout? Because I know you.
August right now is what I'm looking at. That want to get it to the printer. I got San Diego in there, which is an entire week. So that's why it's making it difficult for me to kind of nail down an exact completion date. But I think I've got 19 pages to go at this point, and that's pencil and ink. So I've been averaging about 2 pages a week. I'd really like to get 10 pages a month rather than 8. I've done that, but I've also not done it. So it's kind of like, it depends on how involved each one of the pages are and how much distractions I get throughout the course of the week. But anyway, it's going to be done in August at some point, and then of course the colorist is right behind me, so it won't be like, I finished the last 10 pages and 2 months later I get it'll be a matter of days after I get done before the colorist is finished, and then it's just getting it lettered and then getting it to the printer. So if I get it done early in August, which is my hope, then we should be to the printer before the end of August. And then turnaround time is always a guess. Just never know. So I'm hoping to be shipping it out in September at some point.
Last question. What do you think the next project will be? Are you leaning towards your fantasy, or do you have a couple ideas rolling around?
That's an excellent question. I've got 3 fully developed concepts, stories that I am back and forth with. I've talked about doing a barbarian book, but I don't know that I would do a barbarian book. I might do a Savage Tales type magazine with a barbarian story in it, then maybe a couple other people contributing or something like that, or maybe me just doing the whole thing, but it would just be like something like that. And then, but that seems to me like a kind of an in-between project, not like a major year-long project. So I've been leaning towards the fantasy project, but I've also got kind of this dinosaur adventure thing that I really like as well, and they're both fully developed. The fantasy one is a little bit more involved. It's definitely a one-shot type graphic novel thing, whereas the dinosaur thing could be a continuing type series. So I have not 100% decided yet, but it's probably going to be between those two.
Yeah, I understand that.
I got a superhero concept too, but it's not as fully developed, and these are things that I've wanted to do for a long time. Like the fantasy one, I pitched to Vertigo like several years ago, and they didn't pick it up, obviously, but it's something I've had and would like to do something with and kind of
Complete that journey.
right, exactly, and get it out and say I did it, kind of thing. So that seems to be the likely direction in which I'll go next.
Thank you for the interview.
You bet. My pleasure. We're shaking.